Hi, it's Gadget UK here again. Just a short video on the internal Midi sequencer, or Midi synthesizer I should really call it, that I've installed in here. It's just a little board. It's very small. If I can get my fingers on the camera, it's sort of about that big, size of a matchbox, very tiny little thing. And you've got stereo Midi out, through a 3.5mm socket. So I've routed some wires for that to the jack that I've got on the back here for my stereo audio out. They're kind of just running parallel with the normal YM audio left-right channels. It needs a 9V supply, so the simplest way with that, I could have put a regulator on there to regulate from down from 5 to 3.3 and remove whatever regulators on that board to deal with the 9V input, but instead it was easier just to use the 12V that normally goes through the floppy drive, because I've got a HXC in here in the side, instead of a floppy drive, so it's not really using the 12V anyway, so there's very little in there that's actually pulling anything from the 12V supply, so it's quite a nice voltage to use there. So I've used 4 diodes in parallel, and as I mentioned before, other videos where I've covered diodes, using diodes to drop the voltage. The inducer approximately 0.7V drop, so if you put 4 of them in parallel there, you've got 2.8V drop, which takes your 12V down to about 9.2, and I think you could probably find, in my case 12V was a little bit, just a tiny bit under 12V, it was like 11.95 or something, 11.9, so it's just a tiny bit above 9V, which is ideal. And then the final thing is the Midi in cable, and on the side of the ST, nearest the back, that's your Midi in, and you can reach from the inside of the case. You can see the 2 pins and the marks on the board, pins 4, pin 5, and you just put 2 wires from those to the relevant pins on the Midi. It's like a 5-pin DIN jack, just the same as you get on the, it's a standard Midi thing you get on the board, Midi socket, so you can just wire straight up to the board there. There's a couple of little pads there to mount that on, and that's it. That's straightforward. So I'll show you some of the gains, what they sound like. It's worth noting that whilst this particular Midi synth, I use this SAM2195. It's pretty good. It's a pretty good board. It's a very small chip. It's literally 7mm square. It's tiny. Really is tiny. And the way I started this, I started with a little board of my own. I got I forget what the type of the chip is now. It's QFN 44, so it's 44 pins and it's a QFN package, which means it's a bit like BGA, sort of, where you've got the pins, to mount underneath the actual chip, and they protrude just at the edge a little bit as well. And the idea is it's a surface mounted chip. Stick it on a board, and you've got very small amount of clearance on the sides to be able to mount it. But I got an adapter, a QFN to DIP adapter, and I mounted it on that, and I spent quite a lot of time on Saturday. I had quite a long weekend because I was off on leave on Friday, but with my health not as good as it is, it was pretty difficult. It was hard going with it. I spent most of Saturday messing around with the damn thing, and I actually prototyped the board twice. I ended up with the second board. On the first attempt, I just got nothing. There was no sounds, nothing out, and it's one of these things that, if in retrospect, if I spent more time looking at the schematics for the evaluation board, I would have understood that there were a few things I was missing. On the output, I didn't have any amplification. I just expected it to be, miraculously put in line out levels, and it probably isn't far off line out levels. But I've noticed from looking at the board that I've got in there now, which is an evaluation board, an official evaluation board, there are a couple of transistors there which are probably amplifying the volume there for left and right channels a little bit. Could be as much as 100%. I honestly don't know. I didn't get my scope on it. I did get my scope on it while I was trying to diagnose the original boards I was prototyping, but I was getting nothing. I was getting nothing out. And then the other problem was I explained on the input from the Midi. The way the MIDI interface work on these, there's like a loop back for the current, and you've got to use opto isolators. If you don't use an opto isolator, it pulls too much current, and the current loop's not working as it should do, and it just doesn't work. But although I was using an opto isolator, I think that I didn't have you know, there was a few things going on that I've not got a lot of experience in. One of them was obviously, you know, the TTL level from the Midi is, you know, based on 5 volt, sort of, you know, I don't know, is it 2.5, 3-ish volts-ish. And I was trying to input that through an opto isolator and then drop the voltage to 3.3. And I could see on the scope I was getting, it was working, it was, the opto isolation part was working, but I'm not sure that the level I had there was correct, the voltage level, and I'm not even sure, because I'm not even sure that the signal was clean enough. I did try putting it through as like a 74HC00, a couple of gates through there just to buffer it, and that seemed to clean it up a bit, but the voltage level just didn't look right, and some of the clock edges, the edges there didn't look right. I'm just not really sure. And when I look back, now I look, like I say, in retrospect, I should have looked at the evaluation board. And looking at that board, which I'll show you in a minute, there's quite a few different components that I just didn't have and didn't think that I would need. And clearly those are needed, and clearly those solve all the problems. So, I mean, I've still got the evaluation, my prototype board sat somewhere. I'll probably just strip it down for parts, I'm not that bothered really. This is the original SAM2195 chips I bought. I got 5 of them. They were about £5 each or something, so it cost me like 25 quid from China, which wasn't too bad. So I've got plenty of spares. I guess I could do a giveaway at some point. I might even try and get the prototype board working and do a giveaway of that at some point once I can get that working, but there's a few components I need to order first. Anyway, I'll just show you the board. This is the technical PDF, you know, the sort of tech specs data sheet, call it what you will, for the SAM2195 EK, and this is the evaluation kit. So, like I say, I have to tear my hair out Saturday and spending a good few hours on Sunday as well, just trying to rule out a few things that I hadn't thought of on Saturday. I decided that it was better use of my time and, you know, having my health and everything as it is, and just frustration that I was sort of getting really from working with those 2 prototype boards, that it'd be easier to get an evaluation kit, which is just a pre-made little board. Just see if I can show you that actually. If I go to, this is where I bought it from, Profusion. I don't know if you can see that there. I'll just try and zoom in so you can have a bit of a clearer view of that board. It's, as you can see from looking at the size of the Midi jack there and the 3.5mm socket, it's very small. It's a very, very small board. Like I say, it's about matchbox size, and you can get easy access to the connections underneath, and there are actually separate pads, so you can mount wires and things on there. It's pretty straightforward. Looking, let's say, comparing this to mine didn't have half the amount of caps on there. There's a couple of transistors I didn't have. The opto coupler here, I did have. Did I call it an opto isolate, opto coupler, same thing. I had one of these opto couplers. It's not service mounted like that, but it should have done the job. But there's a few extra diodes, resistors, capacitors, and I think the other thing I was missing as well as the reset circuitry on the. If you look at the original tech spec for not this evaluation board, but the actual chip itself, the SAM2195, it shows you just a line for the reset line coming in, but there's no components there. It's almost like you don't really need it. It just, you know. But after having reread that on the Sunday, one of the things it says is that the reset line needs to be held low for something like 20 milliseconds or something, and then it doesn't mention thereafter. So you assume that it goes high after 20 milliseconds, or you should make it high. You know, it can't, I don't know. It's a little bit. There's, you know, bits of information lacking there. I did try that. I tried a resistor capacitor diode sort of reset circuitry on that, but that still didn't work. So anyway. Bottom line is it's easy to get one of these, as you can see here. Price in GBP, zoom out a bit, £62.72 for one board. So yeah, it's a bit pricey, but you know, by the time you've added postage and VAT, these set you back about £80. So it's a lot of money for what it is. There's not very many games that use it. I think there's about 70 or 80 games on the ST. It might be more, it might be about 80 or 90, I don't know, that use Midi. But for the most part, there's probably about 30 that you'd probably be interested in. I quite like the point and click adventures, which I'll show you some of in a minute or two. The ones done by Sierra, you know, sort of King's Quest, Space Quest. There's a whole bunch of them really. In fact, there's more than I realised. There's a good handful. Probably a dozen point and click adventures for the ST. And out of that dozen, I would say about 6 or 7, maybe 8 of them have got MIDI support, so yeah, it's pretty good. One thing that's probably worth mentioning as well, I guess, is this is a general MIDI compatible board. And when the ST first launched, most of these games you'll find don't really support general MIDI because it was in its infancy. It wasn't really a widespread a standard. It wasn't really an industry standard then. General MIDI sort of came in a few years later, really, or maybe even just, I don't know, halfway through the ST's lifespan. But at the time when Sierra were doing a lot of the games and Delphi and a few others were actually making use of MIDI, they used the Roland Sound Canvas, GM something, I don't know, not GM, I can't remember what it is. The Roland Sound Canvas, anyway, you'll find that's what it supports. And as a result of that, you'll find that majority of games, they sound okay, the instruments sound fine and all the rest of it, but you just get a few where the instruments don't sound quite right. It's one of those, it's a mapping thing. The instruments aren't exactly the same instrument that they used or that they envisaged you would be using if you'd used a Roland Sound Canvas or something. Just go back to the schematics, just give me a sec. Yeah, right, so here's the data sheet again. I'll scroll down a bit. You can see it mentions the different connectors here: MIDI in, line out, DC, 9 volt. Got a nice little diagram of the board here with all the components on it. Like I said, there were quite a few more than I had on my prototype. Component list as well, so that's useful. And you get a nice schematic here. Now, if I'd seen this is what I would have based my prototype on, because this is twice as comprehensive. There's a load of stuff here that wasn't on my diagram. If you look at the MIDI in thing, sorry, I apologise, this is sideways, so you have to sort of, if you're not, tilt your head on the side or something, but I don't, can you rotate in here? I'm not sure. It is a PDF, sorry, apologies for my lack of knowledge of this particular version of Acrobat. Anyway, so looking at this diagram, you can see here, there's the opto coupler where the mouse is now, you can see that here. And there's quite a few different components around there. There's another 220 ohm resistor I didn't have here. There's a couple of coils, for beads or something across there. Got a cap on the input there that I didn't have. I did have a resistor there. Didn't have a 220 ohm resistor there. There's quite a few components I was missing. And the reset circuitry here, very similar to what I had, but different values. I probably didn't have the right values regards to the cap in terms of that time in there, about 20 milliseconds or whatever it is for the reset. I'm just holding that line low, and in fact I might have even got the circuits the wrong way. I've got the feeling I was holding it high for so many milliseconds. But it's pretty basic, if you look at bearing in mind that this stuff at the top here, you've got the MIDI in, you've got the reset circuitry, you've got a crystal in the middle. On the left hand side here, this is stuff to do with power, I think. You've got a voltage regulator, that's fine. And this chip will run off two voltages. You can supply it with 1.8 volts or 3.3 volts. 3.3 volt in my case is what I went with because it's easy, because I've got tons of 3.3 volt regulators. There's not much more to it really. There's just all these caps on the output on these channels here to do with voltage references and stuff, and the analog ground plane, digital ground plane, and some stuff there for your audio out, a couple of coupling caps, and some resistors, a couple of coils. I don't have those two there, L4 and L5, a couple more coils there. I use ferrite beads for that sort of thing. Typically, it's just to filter out high frequencies. If you get a coil, something like a coil rather than a bead, it'll filter out a lot more. But they're not really needed. There's a lot of components on here that are not needed. Anyway, I'll show you some of the games now, so you can have a listen to what they sound like.